From the Fantasy Formula One podcast, I'm Paul, and today we are going over the rules for the 2025 Fantasy Formula One season. If you've already played Fantasy Formula One, then all you really want to pay attention to is this first little bit where we go over what's new and what's changed. Everything else will be review. But I really enjoy every year still looking over the rules, reading them all, and making sure I'm not missing anything. And so what's new for F1 Fantasy Formula One this year? Transfers. I'm going to read it verbatim and then we'll discuss it. If your driver competes in the sprint but is replaced before the Grand Prix qualifying, you'll get a transfer suggestion so you can avoid not classified penalties, which is 20 points. This suggestion still comes out of your transfer limit and is still a negative 10-point penalty. Okay, cool. So basically it'll ping you. It'll let you know if one of your people that raced in the sprint is not going to be in the Grand Prix, which is really nice of them, because otherwise, especially on the weekends when everything is a little closer time-wise, you would have people get crashed out or not be able to compete, and you just wouldn't know unless you were actively watching it. You still have to use a chip to not take that negative 10-point penalty, and it's not free, but it's better than not having your driver drive and taking the negative 20-point penalty. Pit stops. This is cool. Every team will now get points for pit stops during the Grand Prix, but not sprints, because there are no pit stops in sprints. The number of points each team gets will be based on the fastest pit stop, okay? A 5-point bonus will go to constructors who recorded the fastest pit stop and or set a new world record, and they'll get 15 points. That's nice of them. And we'll get into the points they give here in a little bit. But general broad brushstrokes for this pit stop rule. Did the numbers on last year, how many points would have been allocated and things like that. And roughly half to 2/3 of every driver turned in a time that would have gotten them a bonus point. It's fair enough to say that half to 2/3 of the constructors will get bonus points from this. So this increases the value of the constructors. Disqualification penalties. Penalty points for being disqualified will now be applied to the constructor instead of the driver themselves. That's good. Disqualified drivers will not gain any points for the session they were disqualified from. So with the rules of the Fantasy Formula One game, the constructor absorbs the points from the drivers. So if both your drivers get 25 points, your constructor gets 50 points. And there's a little bonuses sprinkled in for the constructors as well. But you would end up getting double dipped with any sort of penalty. If your driver got a DNF, then it would be negative 20 for your driver, negative 20 for your constructor. And specifically last year, when I think it was George Russell got disqualified after the race, maybe it was Lewis Hamilton. When one of them got disqualified after the race, they went from having a very dominant race and getting was going to be 50, 60, 70, some awful amount of points if you put your 3X on them, to getting negative 25 points for disqualification times 2 because of your constructor. And it was a huge 150 point swing. The driver's score will just drop to 0 for that event, and the constructor will get negative 20 points, which I think is great. It helps make it so that a disqualification, especially one that wasn't the driver's fault, doesn't just completely screw over your fantasy team. So that's the end of the new stuff. So you can go ahead and quit listening if you've played Fantasy F1 before and you know the rules from last year, because everything else going forward from here will just be a review. Points will be deducted based on the driver and constructor's performance for the Grand Prix. Classifications through the weekend are based on decisions made by the FIA and Formula One. All right, cool. All right, we'll go to multipliers and chips here in a minute. For qualifying, the drivers, pole gets 10 points. Then all the way down to 10th gets 1 point, 0 for 11 through 20, which makes sense in the spirit of F1. Not classified or no time set, negative 5 points. Now, this negative 5 points only counts for Q1. So if you don't set a lap time, period, in Q1, then you get that negative 5 points for no time set. As soon as you do set a lap time for Q1, unless you move on to Q2, but then you don't take part in Q2, you don't get the not classified. So it is possible to get a not classified for Q2 or Q3, and you will not incur that negative 5 points. Oh, it even says so right there. Cool. That wasn't stipulated last year. That's why I kind of went into that. So drivers who don't set time in Q1 will be given negative 5 points. This includes inactive drivers. So this little bit here is also very interesting. Inactive drivers. It used to be in years past, up until halfway through last year, that you could basically buy a blank spot on your team. If there was a rookie that came in or somebody was just going to quick be a substitute driver that wasn't normally on the grid, you could pay your $4.5 million, so call it roughly 5% of your overall budget. And then as soon as they were no longer racing, you could keep them on your lineup, and you wouldn't get any negative points from it. And this is actually good because a huge liability in fantasy Formula One is drivers DNFing. And sometimes it's just easier to buy a blank spot as soon as you can go ahead and spend $20 million, 20% of your budget to have there only be one driver and your constructors. I'm not saying it's a good idea. You probably wouldn't win, but there's some races you really feel like you would. So I incorporated that strategy some, and to counter that, they made it so now as soon as your driver goes inactive, you'll start taking -5 points for every qualifying session, -20 points for every event. So as soon as, for some reason, let's say race 2, somebody fills in, a reserve driver steps up, and then they never race the rest of the year, you better get them off your team because they'll be taking -50 points-ish for every sprint weekend. For the constructors will score the combined total of their 2 drivers in qualifying. Okay, good to go. That's standard. Constructors will also score points for achieving one of the following. Neither driver reaches Q2, they lose a point. One driver reaches Q2, they get 1. Both reach Q2, they get 3. One gets Q3, they get 5. So again, I'm speaking to the lowest common denominator here, so forgive me. When you race in Q1, the bottom 5 drivers don't continue on to Q2. So as soon as your drivers of your constructor don't make it on to Q2, then no one does, and you get -1 point. And then the next session starts, and all the 15 remaining drivers go out and take turns setting fastest lap times, and then the top 10 move on to Q3. And then those 3 they call it the top 10 shootout, race for fastest times, and then that's the starting grid right there from 1 down to 20. This shouldn't hurt your constructors too much. It's just -1 point if nobody does well. As soon as you have a car that should be in the front of the pack somehow qualifies in the rear, they can pass people, and that gets them a lot of points too. For sprints, for every position gained, you get 1 point. For every position lost, you get -1 point. For every overtake, you get 1 point. And for the fastest lap, you get 5. That positions gained, what that asterisk means is as soon as I am purposely no longer competitively racing, I am slowing down by design, they do not count that as a righteous overtake. And while I'm in the pits. If I'm in the pits and cars pass me, if I go into the pits and I'm P10 and I come out and I'm P20, I don't lose any points for being overtaken. Well, let's say, for this example, somebody qualifies P20 and they win the race. In this fictitious example, if somebody passes all the field, they get those 20 points. But then they go in the pits. The whole field passes them again. They come out of the pits and they pass the whole field again and win. Well, now they get 20, go in the pits, 40, and then a net another 20, so 60 points. These overtakes and these positions gained and lost is where your middle of the pack, your non-top 5, top 10 drivers really can make you points, is by passing people, going to the pits, coming out and passing them again, things like that. For sprint races, you get 8 points if you finish first, and you get 1 point if you finish 8th. Everywhere else does not get a point. That's fine. If you get DNF, not classified, you get -20. And if you get disqualified, you get -20 as well. I think that's good. I think it used to be 25 points last year. I'm glad they changed that. A DNF not classified penalty applies to all drivers, including those classed as inactive or otherwise not included in the final starting grid of the race. Very important. I know I already touched on it once, but this means that if you are all the way up to right before the race starts and suddenly you're, Carlos Sainz that gets appendicitis and you have to bring up somebody to race for you, you have to change out Carlos Sainz, otherwise you're going to take a -20 points. Constructors will score the combined total of the 2 drivers in the sprint as listed above, and this is multiplied by 2. For the race, the positions gained and lost is the same. However, you do have the fastest lap is 5 points. Sorry, it's 10 points, where the fastest lap in the sprint is 5 points. And the driver of the day. The driver of the day is voted on the F1 app, and it is a fun way for you to kind of basically try and give one of your people more points. It also gets the app traffic, so that's one of the reasons they do it. For the race results, First place gets 25 points, second 18, 15, and it drops off exponentially until 10th place gets 1 point, and then nothing for the rest of the pack. Why do they get more points for the race than they get for the sprint? Well, you get 8 points here, 25 points here. 3 times 8 is 24. They don't do half points, and the sprint is roughly 1/3 the distance of a race. So that is why it's 1/3 the distance, 1/3 the points. Excuse me. And also since there's no pit stops in sprints, it's just different. Then classified and disqualified points are the same. That is the same. Constructors, combined total of the race, as well as exception of driver's day bonus, does not count towards the constructor, which, I mean, I'm fine with that. Okay, so here are the pit stop times. This is the new thing. As soon as your pit stop is over 3 seconds, you don't get any points. As soon as your pit stop is between 2.5 and 2.99, you get 2. 2.2 to 2.49, you get 5. And 2.0 to 2.19, you get 10. Under 2 seconds, you get 20 points. If you're disqualified, you get negative 20. And if you're the fastest, you get a 5-point bonus. And if you break a world record, you get 15. But also, as soon as you do break the world record, you also get the bonus, because that's the 5-point bonus, because that's the fastest for that day. Now, what to understand about these fast pit stop numbers? This is they call it time at rest. Just in case you don't know, if you're new, like we all were at one point, this doesn't count for the time you're driving down pit lane. This is the time when you are actually, no kidding, stopped. The average, I think, time at rest is like 2.5, 2.6 seconds, which is why if you get that 2.5, 2.6, that falls under the 2 points. As you get going better and better and better, then you can get more and more points. I want to say the fastest, right there, it has it. The current record is 1.8 seconds set by McLaren. And so these are actually measured to 2 decimal places, as you can see here, not just 1 decimal place. There is a lot of points to be made here, but you have to have a good constructor to do so. So this pit stop time just amplifies the importance of having a strong constructor even more from last year. Team management, exceeding the free outside allowance, you get negative 1 point. So you get two free team trades in between each race, and one of them will carry over to the next race. Haven't read that this year, but that was the way it was last year. One will carry over to the next race. So at any given time, without using a chip, you can replace 3 3-year drivers or 3-year team players. The only time you really want to take this is if one of your drivers is going to be out and you're going to take negative 20 points anyway. You don't want to knowingly take negative 10 points. Well, unless you have some sort of inside intel that says, hey, this guy's going to put up a lot of points, then the general knowledge is don't do it. As soon as you have like a DRS driver, your driver that's going to get double points, or you have a 3X driver that is going to be getting you so many more points and they're sitting out or something like that's going on, then you'll go ahead and take the negative 10 points. But beyond that, it's best just to use after the season starts, just go week by week and handle it that way. All right. Well, that is the end of the game rules.